Okay, so I'll start that again. Welcome everybody to the third public webinar for the Thinking Together in Science and RE project. I'm delighted to have so many of you here this afternoon. We are recording this session, so you'll be able to share with colleagues and other people will be able to watch it. So I'm going to do a quick little introduction, and then I will hand over to our three wonderful teachers. But I thought I'd give you just a little bit of a background about the project. So it's for those of you who don't know anything about this project, it's a SAPRE project, and my name's Jane Yates, and I took over the project lead about 18 months ago. So it's been a 3-year project funded by the Templeton World Charity Foundation, and it's part of their wider project called Big Questions in Classrooms. And I'll say a little bit more about that at the end of the session. But really, in a nutshell, these are the slides we used at the beginning of the project. It's really been about developing philosophical teachers as well as philosophical learners in the classroom through the SAPRE P4C pedagogy. And quite unusual in the fact we brought together science teachers in secondary science contexts and RE contexts as well. So quite unusual in we developed a bespoke level 1 training course, and departments trained together with the 6 schools that were involved. And yeah, it was about developing intellectually challenging conversations to think philosophically in science and RE, but looking at both the concepts in each of those subjects, but also associated between them. So that just gives you a little bit of the background of the project. What I'd like to do now is just tell you how this session's going to run. So I'm going to ask our 3 speakers just to say their names and which school they're from. And then we will start with the 3 presentations that we've got here. After they've given their 3 presentations, we're going to take some questions, and what I'd like you to do is to add questions into the chat as you go along. So it may be that you have a question that's directed to a particular person, or it may be that it's a general question for all 3 teachers. So can I, Jim, would you like to just start off and just give us a little bit of, so we can see who you are on the screen?
Okay, so yeah, it probably sort of flicked to me now, won't it? So I'm Jim Connolly. I'm the head of RE and philosophy at McKavanagh School in Cumbria, which is a very large comprehensive school near the Scottish border. Yeah, that's probably all you need, isn't it?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, and Sam.
Hi, Sam McKavanagh. I'm head of philosophy, religion, and sociology at Larkmead School in Oxfordshire, and I have been for about 8 years, 9 years, maybe now. Something like that.
Okay, thank you. And James?
Hello, I'm head of RE and known as the professional mentor in school at the Greycoat Hospital, which is a school in central London, near Victoria. And I've been here for quite a while now, 19 years in different roles. That's me.
Okay. So what I will say is, although I showed you these aims before about the project, and you'll have a resource after the project where you'll be able to look at our project website, look at some of the resources that have been developed. It's been so much more than that, and it's been a real privilege to work quite in depth with 6 schools. The 3 that we have here, they've all achieved their SAPRE Bronze P4C award, and in fact actually something that's come out quite new in this project is the idea of a department award, so that's been a good thing as well. So without delaying anymore, so I'm just letting some people in, I will hand over to Jim, and I'll just get your slides up for you.
Okay,
but as I said, do put your questions in the chat.
Right.
as we go along, and then we'll take questions after all 3 presentations.
Right, okay, so first of all, just to say it's been our Year 13 Leavers Day today, so I've bid farewell to 20 fantastic A-level philosophers, and it was my son's last day in Year 13 as well, so I'm feeling a little bit sort of overwrought by it all, and crying on and off all day. So if I get strangely emotional while I'm doing this, obviously I'm passionate about the project, but it's been that kind of day too. So we were involved in the project right the way through. We found the early stages were really fruitful in terms of working between science and RE. However, the science department felt they had other focuses in their sort of development plan. So as the project developed, we kind of sort of diverged. So there were very fruitful discussions early on, particularly kind of pushing the scientists to look at questions of knowledge and contestability of concepts, which they weren't familiar with, and pushing us to really go into content. There's a danger, I think, some of our RE in the past had been maybe a little bit skills-based and hadn't got the intellectual rigor that the scientists pushed us towards. So that was one of the benefits we had as the project went on. So I'm just going to talk about this from the RE and the philosophy department side. So you can see on the screen there, we're about 1,300 students. We have a catchment area which is the same size as the landmass inside the M25. So we're vast, sort of sprawling sort of catchment. All our Key Stage 3 students have an hour per week of RE and philosophy. We run PP, so philosophy, politics and economics courses for students who choose in Year 8 and Year 9. For 1 hour a week as part of what we call our character curriculum. And then we've got a very popular GCSE RS course and an A-level philosophy course too. So Jane, I'm going to go Chris Whitty on it and say, next slide, please. So part of what we did as this project was kind of being forced to look at where the questions are in our course, in our big curriculum, and reframing all of it as questions. So what you can see on here, and it'll be easy once this is sort of sent out, so Jane will sort of pick up on the particular questions that we put through. But this had two benefits. One was for us as teachers, kind of going, okay, let's get away from delivering content and look at a curriculum based on big questions and how we explore them. But it also benefited students because they got to see what questions were coming up. And we do quite a lot on priming students to recognise big questions and recognise how you might engage with them. So this is up in all our classrooms. It's in the booklets that students use as they're working in lessons, but they can see this great big grand schema. That's the next slide. So talk about the questions, and I'll get on to how we do a sort of P4C as full inquiries. But what I found really sort of wonderful about this project and the way that my understanding of P4C's developed was about taking out the individual elements and using those as skills in themselves, and how focusing on one can then improve the whole as it's pushed forward. So all of our homeworks across Key Stage 3, what we now have is a single philosophical question. Everything from the sort of the slightly fun sort of what colour might a zebra be if you take away its stripes, to is it ever right to bully a bully? My Year 9s this week have got, is there anything we can know for certain? So it's getting students used to, without the rigour or the background knowledge of philosophy per se, with that idea of dealing with questions. And they have a booklet which looks a little bit like this, where the homework question's set. They then go away, they have to come up with their opinion, which is kind of our working at for Year 7, you see at the bottom, and then putting in their reasons. And as part of the homework, they've got to go and talk to other people. They've got to find out what another opinion might be. So one of the things we've taken from this project was the idea that, yes, we can do standalone sort of inquiries, communities of inquiry, but actually taking out individual parts of the project and using it to inform and develop our practice. So this has worked really well. And in all honesty, other departments think this is fantastic. And we've had, for the first time in my teaching career, we've had parents contact school and go, we really like your homework. We think this is really good. It's a bit annoying when kids come home and ask us what colour is Tuesday or what colour is the back of a rainbow. But actually that engagement has worked really well. So that's been fantastic. Next slide, please. Okay, so that then has allowed us to push forward with the 4Cs. Right, we've got the creative thinking on there. That's our little mark to say we've got a sort of bronze award, and getting students to engage with those questions. But what we've also been able to do, and this has come out of the level 2 training, was getting students to consider the types of questions and what makes a good question. So in the past, students had questions and engaged with them, but that sort of metacognitive level of thinking about what makes a good question is kind of what this displays about. Unfortunately, I should have taken some the close-ups, but it's been fantastic having students being able to then pick out, well, a good question is one where there's a, they don't use necessarily yet the word contestable, but there are concepts that we disagree about. It's a question which we can talk about, but then we can think about more deeply. And some of the students are seeing that one question actually being a gateway into lots more questions that flow from it. So that's been kind of our base, and that we worked with the science department because they decided that having each lesson based around a big question was actually an approach they could take as well. So that we worked on together, and at that point we've then kind of gone different ways. So the next slide has a sheet we've developed to then look at how we record and structure the community of inquiry that we've run. Because one of the things that we found, and again, the sort of scientists pushing us towards this was about the intellectual rigor and recording, because we'd been quite so happy with, you have a discussion, you go through the sort of 10 steps they were, and you enjoy it and you draw it out of it. But we hadn't always been very good about recording it and having something, a sort of document for the students to look back on about sort of charting progress. So we put this together and we've used this from year 7 up to year 13. Noting now what the stimulus, the discussion of questions, drawing out, you can see on the side, maybe it says key concepts. And then again, it came out of the level 2 training, but that first thoughts, developing thoughts and final thoughts has been quite transformative. Getting students to stop, to take stock of where they are before moving on. And you can see we've got then little bits to assess in the top. You can maybe see it says caring, collaborative, critical, and creative. Well, they're just little statements that students can self-assess as they're going through. So the caring one has things like using people's names, listening actively, and stuff like that. And there's just some examples there of where students have filled that in. And I think then we've got some photos of students. Oh, no, we don't need that slide. Sorry, I don't know why that's got in there. That's my bad. That's my year 12's revision that I've been doing with them. Say, sorry, there we go. So yeah, these some students. So the other thing that came out of this project was we hadn't till that point ever done P4C with sixth formers. And looking back, it's kind of hard to understand quite why we'd never done that. We'd seen it as maybe something which would be part of the Key Stage 3 curriculum. But then once you get to exam courses, all of that goes out the window because you've got a specification to teach and you've got to do the exam technique. But as part of this project, we changed it and we made space. And it's made, obviously the content has been a little bit more of a push to get through, but the quality of the young philosophers we've had at the end of it has been transformed. And the group on the photos here are the ones that I've just said goodbye to today. And doing the P4C meant they went from a class of students to a community of learners. They have supported each other, they've pushed each other, they've encouraged and engaged each other like no sixth form group I've ever had before. And that was down to spending the time treating them as equals in this sort of community of inquiry, And you can see on there them engage with sort of continuum lines, and that was Sophia the robot, or Sophia Awakens. They did that one, which we did as part of the metaphysics of mind and consciousness. Sort of started there. But so a couple of things which came out of it, this project for us. One was the push to rigor and recording, and the other was the push to use it with sixth form, where it stood alongside the specification for the A level, but it has enriched and improved the learners we've had. I'm absolutely certain that that will be reflected in the grades they get in the summer. So that's me, and I'll happy to take any questions once we get to that stage.
Thank you very much, Jim, for your presentation. I had the privilege of being in Jim's department for 2 years, so I've kind of got a bit of insight, and it was a really good experience to work
Thank you.
alongside Jim. And it's great to have still kept in contact through this project. So do put questions in the chat. We will move on to Sam now, and we'll take all the questions at the end. And it's really great to see Julie and Maria in the room, who have been two of the trainers that have worked on this project as well. Thank you for joining us. So Sam, you're going to share your own slides, aren't you?
Yep. Well, I'll try to, hopefully it does. Is that okay? Can people see that?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, brilliant. So I work at Larkmead School. As I said, I've been here for about 8 or 9 years, and I think across that time, the very first experience I had at P4C was right at the beginning of my teaching career here, and I kind of always had that sense of how transformative it could be in terms of the classroom. And kind of, I guess, over a bit of time, it kind of started fading a bit into the background in terms of my own teaching practice. Wasn't doing it so much. So actually with this project, it's helped reinvigorate my own passion for it, but also I think it's really sparked something across our school and also our academy trust, which has been really exciting to see. So ready for this, I kind of went back to kind of our school values, and I kind of, because I was kind of wondering, like, why is it kind of work so well? Why is it kind of really spark something off? And looking back to our kind of school values, I kind of started noticing similar words that were popping up in terms of what we talk about in terms of the ethos of P4C, and they were just coming up again and again in our kind of school values. You know, the idea of it being a community, being caring, collaborative. You know, so these are things that were in our school values that we worked really hard on as a school to kind of act as like descriptors rather than just kind of being the generic, you know, marketing type phrases, things that we actually felt reflected our school. And I think that's why, in many ways, P4C's been really successful, at least from my perspective, it's been really successful because it's really latched onto something deeper than just, you know, that transfer of like knowledge from teacher to student, and you go off and sit exams and stuff like that. That kind of recognition that I feel that we have as a school, that education and the education system should be and is much more than the kind of treadmill of how do we get kids to exams and through the exams. And I think in virtue of that kind of shift of dynamic or shift of perspective, it has that consequence of students doing much better. You know, the depth of what students talk about, how confident students become, how articulate students become, I think has really been unlocked by the P4C approach. At all levels, you know, we have some schools in our trust, obviously, at the primaries, but I work in a secondary, but especially at secondary, how it's really unlocked and transformed the classroom. I think it's gone into a situation, at least I feel, where it's really exciting. You know, there's kind of a buzz in the classroom. There's that thing where the students are coming to the lessons really excited about what's going on and what you're learning about, and they're developing as human beings, and I think they recognize that as well, which I think is a really exciting thing, which happens through but also because of P4C. So I think in terms of that whole school level, and then for myself as a kind of department level, you know, I think we have a great curriculum. You know, I think we had some really interesting topics and really exciting stuff, but, you know, really bringing that kind of academic rigor aspect to it. And it's something that's been kind of noted or commented on from like other parts of school or external groups, our actual curriculum is really great, but it really still felt there was something missing. You know, we were getting really good at delivering a curriculum, and students were doing really well in terms of assessments and stuff like that. But actually, there was, you know, that spark wasn't there. And I think we started seeing P4C as a way of transforming that, you know, and especially through that project. I remember in the very first instances, we kind of all the staff who were in the philosophy department, the science department at that time, all went through the kind of level 1 together. And actually, our head of science was like the most, like doing the most kind of exciting and groundbreaking stuff, I think, in terms of the school, in terms of how they'd started to see in that initial first year, how powerful P4C is as a tool in turning the passion on, and, you know, really seeing that spark in the students' eyes. I'd say that's kind of continued through our as the project's gone on, it's kind of morphed a little bit in terms of where P4C is most frequently seen in my department's the philosophy and sociology department. We see it a lot happening here, but we've also started seeing it a lot in our English department, in our maths department. Some of our maths teachers have started really introducing some aspects of the kind of P4C approach, and as well as in art, you know, art and our music departments as well.
Sam, sorry to interrupt you. Your slides aren't moving on. Sorry.
Oh, they're not at all.
Don't mean to interrupt you.
Not at all. They're not. Can you see them if they look when it's like this? Can you see it at all?
Yes. Yeah. You could.
Okay, if I leave it like this, does that work?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Yeah, so our other departments started kind of introducing and taking on different parts of, or including different parts of the kind of P4C approach and strategies, which has been really exciting to see, because I guess especially with the project itself, kind of the philosophy and science aspect, whereas science is kind of doing less than they initially were, and it's kind of maybe occurring in some places, other departments have really kind of taken P4C on based on what they've seen elsewhere. I know our English department, for example, every topic they do, they include a P4C inquiry now. And I was just in a meeting before this about how we can kind of stretch that and expand the kind of P4C approach like fully and properly throughout our school, and kind of really upskilling all staff on that. In terms of like across key stages, what I think has been really exciting, and I think kind of links maybe a little bit to what Jim just said before, that, you know, I think sometimes you get in the mindset of like, oh, P4C, that's kind of like a great key stage 3 thing. Our year 7s, 8s, or 9s will love it because maybe they're a bit familiar with it from primary. But I started trying to do a lot of work in terms of, in particular with our key stage 5, because there's that tendency, I think, especially at key stage 5, to it become really intentionally, acutely focused on getting students ready for their A-level exams. And whilst we were getting students doing really well in their exams, there was that kind of missing kind of fullness to their ability to engage with different ideas. You know, I think sometimes we had students who got very good at being quite formulaic with how they thought and how they wrote. And I think using P4C has really helped enrich that. It's also helped introduce us or bring us onto some other kind of talk types that we've started using in Key Stage 5 and starting to in Key Stage 4. So yes, kind of full or partial P4C inquiries, but also kind of moving into some of the kind of classic debate type format, scriptural reasoning, which I was introduced to in this past year, which, you know, there's kind of elements to P4C in that, and then kind of the Harkness discussion structure and format has been something that I've really enjoyed doing with our Key Stage 5 students. And I think for all of these things, P4C, scriptural reasoning, Harkness discussion, what I think is really great about them is how it shifts that dynamic in the classroom. And what, you know, I think one thing that's scary, I think, for many teachers maybe is that repositioning of the teacher in the classroom from kind of leader, fountain of knowledge and directing everything that's going on to it kind of being the students that kind of bring in those ideas, and they're directing things under the kind of guidance and help of the teacher. So I think that's what's really exciting about these kind of things, is that it's that, and then maybe of democratizing what happens in the classroom. And I think that's really exciting, especially as our students develop and grow. You know, I think it is great to have that shift of dynamic happening between you as a teacher and them as a student. As I say, we've started seeing a real cross-curricular aspect to our P4C, and that's been a real nice journey, I think, from the start of this project, with it being focused on kind of our RE department, our science department, to it suddenly being a much bigger school thing and much bigger academy trust thing. I think we've had a lot of excitement and buzz from our other schools, and we've got another secondary that's about twice the size of ours, kind of it's really piqued their interest, and we have people coming and asking, and can we come and see it? Can we come and work with you? Can we look at how we can adopt it for our schools as well? And I think that's been really nice to see, because that in itself has become quite a collaborative journey that we're starting to embark on. Obviously, a challenge with all that, I think, is that aspect of sustaining it. Within school, one of the big factors that I think started to impact our kind of science department's use of it was turnover. Kind of the natural turnover of, we had one year where quite a few staff from science left, and we had a lot of new staff coming, and we had younger members of staff, and I think the sustaining it and helping to try and keep it as a top priority can often be challenging. And I think where we've seen the most growth is where we've seen the most stability in terms of staffing, I think, in departments. But I think hopefully that will start catching up, and from next year, science will be kind of more back in the fold with that. I think in terms of, we talk a lot now about kind of disciplinary knowledge in RE. I think what's great, especially is where we are as a school, where students are experiencing P4C activities or inquiries in a range of academic areas, that students, I think, naturally are starting to bring in different perspectives when they explore their RE topics. So I think it's really enriched our wider curriculum, because the students are seeing, I guess the students are becoming less boundaried by the subjects they do. They're not seeing the skills learning history as only history skills or English skills. Or I think P4C has been a great tool and vehicle for helping connect up the dots between the subjects and help to, kind of be that golden thread of what we learn about and what happens. I think in particular, the area I've enjoyed the most is in the Key Stage 5 area. And whilst it's good to always have, obviously, a range of stimulus, I think the thing that excites me, the thing that I love using the most is children's picture books. Probably aided by having a 3-year-old, although it's probably me that leads more the picture books than he does. But I love using children's picture books, even in Key Stage 5. I think there's something really disarming about using the picture books, but I think also they're so rich with concepts. I think what makes a great picture book is because it's so philosophically rich with concept that there's so much to work with. Some a bit more on the nose perhaps than others. There's great Dr. Seuss ones, which I think Robin's on this call, isn't it? I've seen before in the thing, Yertle the Turtle and stuff like that, and that can be great because the kids, it's got a nice rhyme to it, it's nice to hear, but actually there's so much depth to it that it's a great way, I think, of actually getting to the concepts in Key Stage 5 when you're approaching really difficult philosophical ideas. I think it's such a great way of breaking down the barrier to kind of difficult content through something which seems quite disarming or quite fun as a thing. So my big passion, I think, is picture books and using those as a way of unlocking P4C, which, if you're buying them yourselves, is not an easy or great way for maintaining your personal budget. But those, as I say, like, happy to answer any questions and stuff like that as we get nearer to the end as well.
Thank you very much, Sam. It's been wonderful to hear you speak as well. And I was chatting to one of our long-standing trainers, Nick Chandley, who I think you must have met when you first, started teaching.
A very long time,
saying
yeah.
he was so enthusiastic. You stuck out to him you know, all those years ago. So it's been wonderful to have you back in this project and taking that further. So please do add some questions for Sam as well, or general questions for Jim and Sam. And I'm going to hand over to John James now. You're going to show your own slides, aren't you?
I am. I'll attempt to do that at least. Let's see how I go.
And yeah, do keep those questions coming in.
So this looks as if it might work.
Yeah.
That looks like it might work, might be working. Yeah, I hope you can all hear me properly. I've been using P4C for quite a while in my own career, and I've been in this school for 19 years now. And Jane asked me to talk about why it was particularly that in my school, we managed to get a level of collaboration between the RE and the science department that that was quite successful. I think there's a long way to go. There's so much potential that has arisen out of the project for more collaboration and more cross-curricular work and development of P4C opportunities in the wider curriculum. But we have had some success so far, and we've really enjoyed taking part in it. Just briefly, the school I'm in is called the Greycoat Hospital. There is no hospital wing. It's been around for a few hundred years near Victoria in central London, and looked to care for the local population. That's why it was set up by the Church of England, hence the name. It's split site. The two sites are, in my estimation, about 8 minutes walk apart, but if you ask some of the students, it's more like 15 or 20 minutes, especially if there's a lesson to get to. It's a successful school. It's high achieving. It takes in students who have a Christian affiliation or more broadly a religious affiliation. Over a third of the school, in fact nearly half of the school, come from the local area, which is very mixed socioeconomically. As you can see, there are over 1,000 students, sixth form of 300, Church of England voluntary aided, and because of that, RE plays quite a key role. So the subject has a fairly high profile. It is recognised by the leadership and the governors as a core subject, and that's recognised in SIAM's inspections every 5 years. I'll say a little more about that later on. The RE department is given curriculum time at Key Stage 3. There are 3 50-minute lessons a fortnight. We operate a 2-week timetable. So RE has the same share of curriculum time as any other Key Stage 3 non-core subject. The entire Key Stage 4 cohort takes the GCSE and studies for the GCSE in years 10 and 11. And we get very good results, compare very well to the national average, and are in line with the results of the rest of the school. So RE has a good profile. We have anywhere between 20 and 40 taking the religious studies A-level each year. We don't offer philosophy, but there's a good deal of philosophy of religion and moral philosophy, of course, in the RS A-level. Just briefly, I think some of the benefits to the RE department of taking part in the project were that we have used P4C at regular points in the curriculum, in the RE curriculum, particularly in Key Stage 4 and in some of the sixth form wide RE teaching that we do. But the project enabled us to recognise that what we're doing is a very useful technique and does complement our curriculum. We consider we have a strong curriculum, and inspections have confirmed that. But we were really using P4C at relatively few points. We've been able to pinpoint so many more opportunities to use P4C. We've been able to name our approach more successfully to the students and make them realize that discussion is actually a way of working. I think it's very easy for pupils to assume that if they're not writing, they're not really working. And we've been able to impress upon them that being skilled in discussion and having a good approach to discussion, using that as an opportunity to challenge yourself and challenge others, is a specific way of working and of learning. Using the 4Cs has been an opportunity to develop our in-department assessment, to look at particular skills that we want to develop in the students when we're talking with them. And it's enabled them to do more peer assessment as well, self-assessment. Our Key Stage 3 curriculum is very much concept-based. So P4C lends itself really well to supporting the way we like to work, really based on what Clive Erica and the Living Difference locally agreed syllabus did down in Hampshire and Dorset, I think, and that was adopted by Westminster. So P4C has been a really good way to celebrate that use of concept-based teaching, and we've been able to extend that more to Key Stage 4. I was trained initially in P4C probably about 15 or 20 years ago by people like Will Ord and Barry Heimer, and then I was trained, I don't think it was by Sapere actually, I don't think they were training others on behalf of Sapere, just sharing P4C as a technique. And I was very much of the opinion, because of the training, that a P4C community of inquiry had to include the full 10 steps. So it's been really useful for us to have much more recent training from Sapere and to see that elements of concept-based inquiry can be used in lessons, which means you don't have to dedicate such large chunks of curriculum time to it, which presents us with more opportunities. The other way that we benefited from being part of the project is because, as any teacher's familiar with, there's a pressure to deliver a curriculum in terms of its content. We can easily bow to the pressure of exam specifications or making sure we've completed a medium-term plan. And in the end, the assessment of that ends up being the tail that's wagging the dog. P4C is an approach that really brings some of the joy back to the learning and hands the power over to the students and enables them to take ownership of what they're doing. So that's been really good for us. I think the recent Ofsted report in April about the state of RE said that we have to be really careful not to let Key Stage 3 be dominated by teaching GCSE or even A-level exam skills too early. So P4C is a great opportunity to develop the skills of thinking and of talking, rather than focusing just on curriculum content. But how did we manage to collaborate? The science and the RE departments at the Greycoat Hospital. Well, initially, it was another RE teacher who agreed to be the representative in the school for the project, and she left about 6 months after we joined the TWP project. So I took over. There, as Jane would tell you, the momentum for our involvement in the project was slow at first. It's picked up a lot more in the last year or so, partly because the science department was very resistant. They were interested in the idea, but they also kept saying, where do we find the time to do this? This sounds like another demand on our time. And our curriculum is so content heavy at Key Stage 3 and at Key Stage 4. How are we meant to do this? So it took some persuading. I think there were some tipping points at which the science department realized that they really could benefit from being involved in P4C. One of them would be when Maria, who's been such a great trainer for us, she's been so helpful, she came in and helped the science department and the RE department to pick out the opportunities in our curricula to explore concepts. This slide that I'm showing you at the moment was part of a training session that representatives from the RE department and the science department delivered as whole staff CPD and we shared basically some of the outcomes of the project and the process of the project. And you can see that whilst it was easier in a way to pick out key concepts in RE and important inquiry-based questions, the science department now feel equally confident in looking at their curriculum and saying, where are some of the key concepts? And this is really just a tiny handful of the concepts they picked out, and the kind of questions that they've been asking students to explore in lessons. Not necessarily taking an hour, but taking 10 minutes, 15 minutes occasionally in lessons. So I think when science teachers realized that they had a new understanding of their own curriculum, then they realized that the project was beneficial to them, and they were rediscovering some of the ideas that had made them scientists and had really intrigued them and interested them in the whole discipline of science. They also realized that they had some commonality with RE, looking at questions of ethics, particularly looking at questions of proof, defining terms philosophically. They realized there was just as much scope in science to do that as there was in RE, and that doing so wasn't a luxury. This also, when Maria came in and interviewed some of our Year 9 students after a few inquiries had been done in science lessons, these were the kind of comments that the students made. And they spoke very favourably about concept-based inquiry and talking philosophically in science lessons. There's no doubt students always enjoy being able to talk, but being able to talk and not just bombard each other with opinions, but to really critically engage with each other, meant they really valued those kind of inquiry activities and the teacher using those techniques. The science teachers realized at this point that that the P4C approach would improve students' engagement with and the interest in the core content that they were so concerned to cover, to deliver. And that if the students were really engaged and interested in that content, then it could be delivered more efficiently, and that the learning would be deeper. Also, they saw that students were much more ready to ask questions in class rather than just answering questions about knowledge they'd acquired. Just today, I heard from a science teacher about a Year 9 student who very, very rarely speaks in class, and they held a community of inquiry, and the student volunteered to speak twice and spoke with great thought and insight. And that's something that they would attribute simply to using P4C techniques in class. But why is it that I think the collaboration between RE and science has worked so well? Apart from those tipping points, I think it's actually to do with our context. And I can talk to you about our context, but I think it's still relevant to schools around the country and anywhere where, of course, there are such different contexts as well. So my role is quite unusual in that although I'm the head of RE, I used to be an advanced skills teacher whilst the grade existed. Now I'm a lead practitioner, and I have the title professional mentor here, which means I work with a number of departments. I'm also the induction coordinator for early career teachers, and I'm the professional coordinating mentor for student teachers. So I'm in and out of other departments all the time, and I'm often talking about teaching and learning, sometimes at training events, often with my peers who are middle leaders, but also with classroom teachers at every level. So that helped give me an excuse to talk to people about a pedagogical approach, to talk to them about P4C. They didn't think that was unusual. And I think in your schools, if you have people who are able to bridge the gaps between departments, and in secondary schools at least, and if you're somebody who can afford to ignore those kind of subject silos where it's easy to isolate yourself, or even year groups in a primary school. If you're somebody who can move across those, then you're an ideal person to aim to promote a different pedagogical approach. But also, my school is quite a reflective community for various reasons. Each year there is a pastoral theme chosen. So in the past we've had the year of responsibility, the year of community, truth has been another pastoral theme, growth, discovery, I could go on and on. And every year at the beginning of the academic year in September, when staff get together, we all brainstorm the theme that's been chosen. And whilst one of the senior leaders will ask different groups to share what they've associated with the theme, I'll put together a little mind map like the one you see there. So people will be sat around in groups, not necessarily in subject disciplines. They're happy to reflect on a conceptual level. Every teacher is seen as somebody with a pastoral responsibility as well, not just as a subject teacher, which again helps to break down some of those barriers between different subject areas. Every teacher is expected to lead one act of worship, either with a whole key stage or with one year group, at least one act of worship during the year. And that encourages conceptual or even philosophical thinking, as well as religious. Something that's really helped as well is that although we're a split site school, we have communal staff areas, we have staff rooms. We're not split physically into departmental areas. So a lot of people will meet at lunchtime, and whilst they'll talk about themselves, they'll also talk about school life, and they'll talk about their subjects and their approach to their subjects. That's helped me work with the science department because we already have friendships, and that's not something you can make happen in every school, I realise. With the SIAMS inspection that happens every 5 years for Anglican and Methodist schools, apologies if you know this already, but what's inspected is the quality of management of the school and leadership, the collective worship and how distinctive it is if you're an Anglican school, but also the quality of RE and whether the school ethos affects every area of school life. In preparation for that inspection, staff are asked to reflect on the big ideas, the values, the spiritual values, if you want, that underpin their subject areas. And that, in a way, has softened people up to the idea that they can think philosophically about their own subject area. So that's helped me. When the middle leaders meet, when the heads of department meet, we always talk about teaching and learning across the school. So there is a kind of commonality, a collegiality there. And the school has been very open to CPD led by teachers, which is why just recently we were able to present to the whole staff our experience of being part of the project. So I think a really important element in us being able to collaborate was that I was as evangelical as possible, really, about P4C as an approach to teaching and learning. And that always has an effect, a little bit like enthusiasm in a classroom. I hope people were affected by that. I was definitely helped by the fact that there are good relationships between the staff in the school, and that we work collaboratively to an extent anyway. But I think the same can work in reverse. If you want to champion P4C as a curriculum approach and you can get colleagues interested, then in your school that does help encourage reflection on values, on big ideas, and encourages people to work together and not to feel so trapped by the sheer amount of content that we all have to deliver.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, John, and to our three speakers. What a rich diversity. And what I didn't say at the beginning, actually, seem to have skipped the slide, is the project actually was for year 9 and 10. But I think you'll agree, the project has filtered out into all across the whole of secondary school, and you know, we found that with the two special schools that we've got involved, and James Cook, I can see that you're here as well. So you know, it's gone way and beyond the year 9 and 10. Keep forgetting that it's year 9 and 10 right from the beginning. So I'm going to go back. So if people continue adding questions, I'm going to go right back to the beginning of the questions. I don't know if you want to, I can read your question out, Grace, or you want to come off mic and read that very first question about sixth form.
Yeah, I just obviously I think it's fantastic to do philosophical inquiry with sixth formers, but I'm just wondering what more you might say to colleagues who might be watching this, who might think they'll struggle to justify the time to inquire and have dialogue in a packed A-level syllabus.
Somebody, Jim?
Shall I start? Because I think that the question came in just as I was doing my talk, Grace. A couple of things which I'm only speaking from practicality from the groups that I've worked, so there's no sort of theoretical or sort of research background to this. We're a comprehensive school, and I will take students onto the A-level course, or as long as they're accepted on the sixth form, I will take them in. So students who are doing our philosophy and resitting maths, yeah, the students who are, yeah, they're not all high flyers. And I do find some struggle to own to like being a philosopher. They see it as something which they find interesting, but they get to this sort of the academic part of the sixth form, and they get quite scared. It's a rabbit in the headlight sort of approach to it. So one of the benefits of doing P4C has been allowed students to make their own connections between ideas, and to get to grips with the idea that you can't just study philosophy, you have to be a philosopher to do it. You've got to be in the game. And that's had real impact. I've got some students who, actually I've got a couple of students who only stayed in the sixth form when they're really wobbly because they're enjoying philosophy, because they felt it was their subject. And that came about because of doing the sort of P4C. The other thing that it's really beneficial from is there's quite a lot on their specification that can feel very atomized. And the doing P4C allows or necessitates building connections. So what you've done sort of the original question, I found the sort of sixth form, you get into it and they start going, oh, hang on, is that a little bit like that? Or does that connect to what they said? And then all of a sudden you sort of see these sort of, the cogs turning and the sort of lights going on, and they're starting to make connections that they hadn't before, which for the 12 mark questions and the 25 mark questions on the A-level spec are actually quite hard to teach unless they've had that realization themselves. So that's what I would say to that.
Thank you, Jim. I don't know if Sam or John, you have anything to add?
I think from my experience, I think now I kind of think to myself, like, I can't believe I always wasn't doing this. I think, kind of like Jim says, it helps the students connect some of those dots and link some of those ideas up. But also, I think it's a great way of kind of, as a strategy, as a way of not delivering, but as a way of getting students to unlock and really engage with the material and the ideas, and actually to be philosophers is, I don't see anything that's more powerful, because, it's kind of, it's so transformative, I think, in terms of how it literally shifts the students' personalities. It shifts them as a student, as an academic, as a philosopher, that I think, whilst it feels, if someone's never tried it, I think sometimes it feels like, oh, that's just another thing. Can I devote time? But I think the wider benefits are so enormous, from it, that, even if somebody only tried it once, I think, especially at A-level, they would try it once and think, actually, this needs to be a regular feature, whether it is the whole inquiry, or if it's a partial inquiry, or it's concept activity, something like that. I think it just unlocks and transforms the whole A-level.
We need to get you two talking to the DFE, don't we? I don't know, John, have you got anything to add in relation to sixth form generally, or A-level?
Yeah, I think as a teacher of RSA level, I find often that when students come out of Key Stage 4, having taken their GCSEs, it's easy for them to have a view of learning that learning is really just about accumulating knowledge and a certain level of understanding and then having to regurgitate it in an exam. But the challenge of A-level is so different to that. And in RS, most of the marks are available for careful analysis and critical evaluation. And somehow we have to disabuse students of the illusion that the teacher is the source of all they need. I think philosophical discussion really equips them with an experience of seeing themselves as the agent in the learning process, really, so they can own the learning, and they have a sense of not just entitlement to think critically and to voice their critical views, but they realize that that's some of the substance of the A-level. So it's really key. So P4C it's an experience of being the student, but not just being a passive recipient of knowledge. And that's where I find the real use is, the real value.
Thank you for those responses. Really powerful responses. So I'm going to move on to James Cook. I don't know if you want to read your question, James, about student growth.
Yes, very interesting. Thank you to the speakers as well. It's great to listen to you. I was just interested because I'm coming from a SEND setting, and I think from what we found, there's been lots of growth for our learners. But I was just interested in terms of your learners. What do you think's been the standout, and what's been the best example of growth as a result of P4C? But a lot's already been mentioned.
Somebody like to start off? Sam?
No, I was just thinking about I think sometimes the thing that always stands out, strikes me the most, is sometimes those aspects where you as the teacher suddenly feel like your entire mind or view has been changed by something the students have said. And I think, it's that, for me, it's that aspect where you get students who are kind of, the balance between where the knowledge acquisition or where the insight comes from has completely shifted, instead of the teacher being the one who's kind of like, oh, have you guys ever thought of this or that? And these are suddenly actually a student saying something, and it really shifts and changes how you think and feel. And at this point now, I think there's almost like countless times where I've experienced and seen that P4C has allowed that to happen, that you kind of take that moment, as a teacher, you're kind of like on the back foot suddenly. You think like, whoa, like actually really that's kind of blown my mind in that sense. I think it happens all the time, I think, from P4C.
Thank you. John or Jim, would you like to?
Yeah, I think in terms of student growth, I see growth in the students who might not normally make those verbal contributions in class. I mentioned the student in the science lesson just today who spoke for the first time willingly in a long time. We're not really sure why she has been quite so quiet in lessons, quite so passive, but for some reason I think the structure, maybe the autonomy the class had in choosing the inquiry question for themselves meant she felt able to and motivated to contribute. But also those students who might not be so strong in terms of their written work, they're given an opportunity to participate and to make very thoughtful contributions, and it can motivate them to understand that it's worth taking advice about their written work. It's worth pursuing those literacy skills in writing, because the P4C process affirms that they do have those skills verbally.
Yeah, I absolutely support all of those. Kind of other just examples. It's the way, isn't it? You get these questions, and you get a couple of students who come to mind. One student who hadn't done very well elsewhere, had struggled in other lessons, sort of low-level distractions, disruption, that kind of stuff. But they really thrive with the P4C, and it's that ability to being able to question the question. And I don't really know how to put this in phrase. I think they're the kind of child who annoyed other members of staff rather than when they be given a question, just knuckling down and getting it written down and answering it. The ability that we have through the P4C to go, but why are you asking that? Why should I be bothered about that? Do you not mean this would be better? Or and being able to sort of come in, it's a slightly more, I don't know, adult, intellectually advanced way, I suppose, but it'd come across as disruptive elsewhere or unhelpful to the way that that teaching model had gone. So bringing that student into the learning process and then being able to see that value and recognize it in themselves actually meant they had a space to do that with us. So another lesson, so we're actually happier to go, oh, okay, I actually get that in this lesson, I'm doing this just because the teacher said so. That's the reason there. And the other ones we've had to progress with our student P4C, particularly with the sort of sheets that we've used in the first developing thoughts, actually that constant checking in and that constant sort of moving forwards has really supported some students. So they kind of built on what I can't remember, John, or I think John, you said about going from that idea that it was just talking and just a sort of relaxed social activity almost. That rigor of sort of checking in, how is my thinking developing, and then recognizing that their mind had been changed, they were learning things almost minute by minute, has allowed students to see their own progress, and that's always going to be more powerful than us just recognizing that they've changed or they've learned stuff. But when students recognize that for themselves, that's the real driver.
Thank you all. Sorry about the dog in the background. So we've got a couple of questions here from Stephen, who I'll read out your question. I realise you have got a problem with microphone, and then a question from Sophie around the sort of practical implementation and in embedding. So I'll read out of P4C. Where do you start, really? I think perhaps some of you are asking. So Stephen's question was how what do you recommend for starting to embed this approach and using it in lessons? And I don't know if Sophie, would you like to come off and maybe if we can kind of join those two questions together. Is Sophie there? Are you able to? Oh, you have no mic either. Okay, I'll read your question, that's fine. So your question is, so I'll just take it back up. I'm interested in the practical implementation. How have you embedded this within the curriculum inquiry questions? Is it overtly put into the lesson PowerPoint in every lesson? So I don't know if you can kind of cover those two together. They're quite similar. Don't know who would like to start off.
I could start off. No, I wouldn't say the P4C approach is used in every lesson at all. It might be used as a way to engage students in a new topic or a new idea to see how it fits in with their lived experience or their existing knowledge or their interests, really. Or we might use it during a unit of work to explore a concept. Once we've identified a concept, to explore that concept more deeply. But sometimes it's as a means of reflection at the end, as if to say, what was the point of studying that? Why do we need to know this? Why does it matter? But when it's used, we will, if it appears in a PowerPoint slide, if we're using a PowerPoint slide, then we would tend to use the abbreviation P4C, or we would use the word inquiry and make it clear that we are now using some of the techniques that we've used before. And I'd say, in answer to Stephen's question, how to start embedding this approach, what has surprised students most of all, I think, is when the teacher chooses a stimulus and then says, there's now space in the lesson, not for me to tell you about the stimulus or for you to answer closed questions, but for you to ask a question, to formulate a question. And I think that handing over of ownership of a section of the lesson is something that students really enjoy, and that they are trusted to come up with a question. And initially, of course, the question might not be a great question. And at that point, we can do the metacognitive work and say, well, what makes this a good question and what doesn't? But simply the ability to say to students in a lesson, it's your time now. We want to know what you're thinking. We want to know what you're wondering. And then we're going to dedicate some time, either this lesson or next lesson, to pursuing what it is you want to know. So I would start with that, the formulation of a question in response to a stimulus.
I suppose we don't use P4C very often as in that sort of tag, but we will use it every lesson. So across Key Stage 3, there is some element in every lesson. Often it's the homework questions, so they invite that sort of open thought. Lots of our assessment structures are built around the 4 Cs, so sort of caring, collaborative, creative, and critical. We might talk about that in terms of thinking, or it might be talking in a sort of creative, collaborative way. And the generation of questions as well. This slide taken from Jane, because like Jane mentioned before, when she worked with us, one of the things we sort of used were sort of starter images into mystery objects with I see, I think, and I wonder as sentence starters. And I did that today with a year 8 group. We had doing Dia de los Muertos, and so the Day of the Dead, and I had an ofrenda, the sort of shrine set up. And we started with I see, I think, and I wonder. And when we first started using those, we had lots of students just observing things they saw. But now we use those, and I had half of the class who were instinctively asking questions. So I would go big. If you're talking to embed this, go strategic. With us, it was the whole curriculum based around questions, and then every lesson. And, go big, go home.
I think it sounds like maybe at my school we're kind of in between those two perspectives. That we kind of have very distinct time, place, P4C sessions or inquiries in our department, but then we might have some small features of maybe like concept activities in some lessons, or maybe kind of talk-based activities based on an aspect of something we're studying in a lesson. So it sounds like we're kind of a bit halfway house. I think ultimately it's kind of your context, everyone's context is going to vary. And I think it's establishing and working out how it's going to work best in yours, which is, I think, the tricky thing with implementing anything, but P4C as well.
Okay, I'm going to stop the questions there, but thank you very much for your responses. So I hope you don't mind, Grace, I've skipped over your question, but perhaps Sam could respond to that in an email about disciplinary boundaries. But I want to spend the last 10 minutes sort of summing up, and Grace is going to say a few words. I've got a few little slides just to show about what you'll get as a result of coming to this session. So yeah, a huge thank you to the 3 schools, 3 teachers. I know it's a really busy time, and I kind of like tentatively asked, and you've all been amazing, and putting the time in to do this, and I'm so pleased that we've been able to do this. It's so much better hearing from yourselves about how it's worked in 3 different contexts, but lots of commonalities, but also some sort of unique aspects as well. And I think the thing that stands out to me is your enthusiasm for P4C. I picked that up from all 3 of you, and I think that's a really important point, isn't it? You having that enthusiasm for it and being able to spread that out into your departments as well. So I'm just going to share the slides, and it was lovely to hear that lovely to hear you mentioning your trainers that have supported you. And I also know we've got one of the other another school here, Oxfordshire School here as well. So it's great. Thank you to Maria and Julie as well, who've really worked hard. It's not always been easy. We started this project during COVID, and that was quite difficult. Oh, mine's not working now either. So we've really had to persist with this through all those different times of COVID as well. So thank you as well, Maria and Julie, for all that you've done. So I don't know why mine won't present either. Don't know why it won't. anyway, I think you can see here. So what you'll get sent after this session, and in fact, I will put in the chat in a minute, is I've created a Padlet that will have the 3 presentations on, a PDF of those. Also, the recording of this session will go onto there, if you can see where it says session slides and recording. There's also some background information about the project, some information about the new SAPRE pathway, which Grace will say a few words about in a minute. There's also some resources as well for you to sort of take away. And we are developing these at the moment, so that they won't always be there in that format, but so you've got something to sort of take away with you after this session. There's also an article by Pat Hannam about RE and P4C, and then some examples of case studies of secondary schools who've used P4C. The other thing I wanted to mention, so this is part of a series of public webinars. We've already had 2, some of you may have been before. We had a wonderful session not that long ago, earlier on in last term, P4C and SEND, which James was involved in, James Cook, who asked a question before. That you can watch the recordings of those. That was a wonderful session. We've also got a session with Linda Dunlop and Pat Hannam, who ran a session on a sort of a conversation about philosophical inquiry between those 2 subjects. Again, you've got the recording, the resources that go with that. So if you lose the emails and you're thinking, oh, where is that Padlet? Where is that webinar? This is on the SAPRE website. And just I want to highlight that there's our next webinar, the final webinar of the project, is by Pran Patel, who's talking about decolonising science and RE in P4C. So that would be a slightly different format, but I think it's going to be a really interesting session. Please do sign up. We've had quite a few people signed up already. And then just lastly from me, those of you who might not be aware of the Big Questions in Classrooms project, this is a huge project that Templeton World Charity Foundation has funded. So they've funded people like RE Today, they've funded people like Cullum, and they've funded various different universities in quite big projects. So if you're interested in the whole of the Big Questions in Classroom project, there is a webinar in a couple of weeks talking about the report where they evaluated all of the Big Questions in Classrooms project, and the sort of outcome, if you like, and the learning from that is about education innovation. So if you're maybe somebody who's a middle or senior leader interested in education innovation in terms of all of those projects, science and religion, they're all science and religion projects. Some were just science, some were just RE, and some were both, like ours. Please, you're welcome to join that session. And I'm going to stop there and let Grace say a few words just to finish up with.
Oh, thank you, Jane. I'm just going to say a few little kind of bits of information about SAPRE's wider offer, but just before I do, I just wanted to acknowledge that this project started before COVID. It's been extremely challenging for partners to engage with it because of everything they've been going through. And it was really hard for Jane to pick it up because it was handed over to her. She's done an absolutely amazing job. And the notion of these webinars where we're disseminating this absolutely amazing best practice, from colleagues who've got, decades of experience between them, amazing, and they're her baby. So thank you thanks, Jane. And thanks everyone for being part of this. I've made so many notes, I've got a really cramping hand, so thanks. I just wanted to sort of pick up on something that came up a bit in people's presentations. Many of you may know, but you might not, that we have put, the SAPRE team, a lot of work into redeveloping our professional learning pathway. And one of the things that we've really focused on in the new Level 1 course is dissolving a little bit the boundary between short exercises and these richer, longer inquiries. And this is important news for secondary schools and for sixth forms, because practitioners there can realise that while extended dialogue is immensely useful for students, meaningful philosophical activity can happen in short bursts. And I think we've heard from some practitioners how useful that can be in unlocking the application of P4C within curriculum subjects, GCSE, A-level, etc. So I really encourage you to look at what we've done with the new pathway and explore whether there's anything there for you. For people who've done their level 1, we offer some extend modules in P4C, and what they are is 90-minute sessions that explore some aspect of the application of P4C. And a couple of them are coming up in a link that I'll share, which focus on some of the ways our thinking has moved on since the level 1 that some of you might have taken, and particularly some thinking around how we articulate philosophical content. And I know one presenter talked about introducing students to the idea of contestable questions. In the new level 1, we do provide more vocabulary for students and teachers, thinking about what makes a philosophical question really fruitful, and the notion of contestable actually is part of that. So there on the Extend P4C link, you'll see a little bit more about our wider offer. And then I just finally want to make people aware that many of the resources that have been created as part of this project are going to be made permanently available for free on our new SAPRE Resources Hub, which is actually the p4c.com as it previously was, set up by Roger Sutcliffe and Steve Williams and others, has been gifted to SAPRE, and we have been populating with loads more resources, and the resources from this project will be there as well. And we hope that's a lovely, one of the many legacies of this project, that people can access the things that have been produced and try them themselves. So they're the main things. Rather than share slides, because I know having issues with slides, I've posted the relevant things in the chat there. So thank you again for everybody for a really, really interesting webinar.
Okay, and just, yeah, final thank you, Grace. Final thanks to everybody for coming. Do share it with your colleagues when it becomes a recording. And a final thanks to our 3 wonderful presenters. Do put a little comment in the chat. I think once we've done the final webinar in June, I'm going to send out a little evaluation link for all the webinars, you know, see who's been to what and what thoughts people have got. So we're not doing an evaluation, but you know, please do write a comment in the chat, you know, what you've gained from it, that kind of thing. It's always useful to hear that. But thank you very much for all attending. I'll let you all slip away.
Thanks, Jane. Thanks, Grace, for that. That was really that was really good. That was really
I'm going to stop recording.
Oh.
There we are.